And we're back. I'm Professor Scott Plum with the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
Neglected, ignored, taken for granted, just a number. This is how many customers feel when doing business. And because of this, they are vulnerable to the next salesperson that comes along. Or maybe they are actively looking for an alternative supplier. But we're sure this isn't true for you, is it? So think about your customers while Scott and I discuss the topic of building stronger client relationships, all that and more on episode 424 of the Get in the Door podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. On our book club today, The Challenger Sale, we're covering Chapter 7, Taking Control of the Sale. And this chapter covers...
Wait a minute, I'm going to take control of this conversation, Scott.
Oh, really?
And I'm going to do this.
Well,
and
that's not the way they mean to take control.
Isn't that what they're talking about?
That's not it.
That might be aggressive.
Yeah, well, I'll read out of the book, chapter 1, verse 1, that the Challenger sales, the Challenger reps are naturally more comfortable talking about money, and they're able to push the customer. So I found it really ironic that they specifically address talking about money.
Yeah, that's one of your big things. You like to talk about that fear.
Well, it's a conceptual thing that we have, and it's based on how we were raised. There's 3 areas we're raised. One, it's not polite to talk about money, which is the most common one, or there's plenty of money, or money is scarce. So we have one of those 3 mindsets, which then emulates our behavior. And this reference is being really specific about taking control, about the constructive tension. So they use this tension diagram and challenging them on the way they see the world and pushing back in tough negotiations. And negotiations in this reference are talking about multiple items, not just price. Too often salespeople get really locked in on negotiations and they're talking just about price, and it's not price, it's compromise, it's discounting. That's not negotiations.
Yeah, that was near the chapter of the book. I don't want to get into, or to the end of that chapter. I don't want to get into that too early because I think there were a lot of important things that happened up front in this this difference they make between being assertive and aggressive, and comparing that to the more passive or the relationship builder who tends to be more passive, which I found their argument to be very valid.
Yeah.
But one of the things they talked about was being willing, I think, to ask the difficult questions, which is the challenge, right? But also to ask for something when they want something of you, right? So could you get me more information on whatever? Well, sure. If I get you this information, the challenger would ask, are we ready to move to the next step? And too often, I think salespeople become the shall answer man for everybody. Can you get me this? Sure. And we go get them that. And we get nothing for it. And can you do this? Sure, I'll change everything around. And I tell the story, and maybe I've told this before, but when I was early in sales, I had a man come into my store. I was in an audio store, sold stereo systems. He asked me all kinds of things. I was moving all my audio packages around, and those were the days of speakers and receivers and amps and turntables, and I kept making different systems for him. And when all got done, he said, "Thanks, man." And I never asked the question up front, is if I put a package together for you that you like, are you willing to buy it?
Right.
And that would have given value to all the work that I did. And I think that's a real passive way of looking at sales, when we do all this work and we never get anything for it.
And another approach would be, suppose I did all that, what would happen next?
Right.
So we're really identifying what the next step is. And Covey talks about this, bringing the future to the present, and not necessarily asking, are you ready to make a purchase? And although the challenger sale process does say that taking control happens.
Are you afraid to talk about money? Is that why you're saying it that way?
No, I'm not saying that. But sometimes when the prospect,
I know your mom
told
you shouldn't talk about money.
Right. When they feel pressure coming on at them, then they end up being defensive, and they kind of become resistant, and sometimes they can see that coming, so they end up recoiling a little bit.
But whatever it is, you've got to get something. You've got to get some concession for what all the work you're being asked to do.
And that's a part of that question is, suppose I did that, what would happen next?
Right.
And then you find out, and then you go, and anything else that you need to know? What else would you need to see? What else would you like to know? Are there any other questions past that? So now you're really taking control of the situation. And in negotiation, this is called a shopping list. So there are some people that will just keep the salesperson on the run or keep the other person on the other side of the table on the run. By every time they do something, they end up asking for something more, and then they come back and they do something more. And then you say, besides this, is there anything else?
Right.
So
and that's
really,
a closing technique, right? It's when you're hitting objections, they have these 3 objections and you answer number 1 and now they come up with number 2. And instead of smoking those out and getting all 3 objections at one time and burning 1 and 2 because they really didn't matter and getting to the real objection, you just keep answering objections and again, running around like a dog chasing his tail.
Right. But you're also getting a list of everything that they have in mind. So now when you have everything, now you can negotiate because now you know what items are in trade and what we're exchanging for each other to get to what we want. Yeah. So we also know what's important to them too.
Well, we're going to talk about this whole negotiation thing in a couple of weeks. Scott and I have some disagreements on negotiation. At least we think we do. Scott is of the mind that a salesperson shouldn't learn too much about negotiations. I think they should know, for this very reason that you're talking about, is if they don't know that there's a lot of other concessions that can be made, they're going to fall back on price. You tend to think that if they learn negotiation, they'll start talking about price right away. At least that's the feeling.
Right. You're right. Absolutely right. And I'm curious on our listeners, especially when it comes to leadership, sales managers, director of sales, business owners. Do you want your salespeople to negotiate? And I'm curious, and I'm sure Bill is, on what position that you take as a business owner or as a leader of a sales team on the position of negotiating. And Bill and I will talk about different perspectives, kind of a point, counterpoint, and it's going to be a very fruitful conversation, I'm sure, because I love negotiations, but it's not the same as selling. And we'll talk more about that.
We'll see. We'll see where we stand. We really haven't delved into this with each other, and this was kind of forcing our hand a little bit. We had this conversation planned for down the line, but I asked to push it up because I want to talk about this in relation to this Challenger sale, because obviously in this book they're going through a negotiation process that may be very different from what you had in mind, but is very similar to what I had in mind.
Right. So, totally agree.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I want to talk about, there's an interesting line. I can't find it right away, but he talks about the sales process and moving the sales process forward, and everything that we're trying to do in this taking control is to move the sales process to whatever that next logical step is. And I had a situation where my son John was a baseball player. All my boys were baseball players, but John was actively trying to get recruited by a school. We went and talked to a successful coach, and he asked John, he said, what's the goal when you're at bat? And John said to get on base. And what do you think the coach said?
I don't know, but I think of the movie Moneyball. That's the goal, get on base.
Well, that's the start of the goal, but the end goal is to score a run.
Right.
And I think too many salespeople are happy with getting on base, and they forget that their whole goal is to score a run. And he talks about this when he talks about salespeople who get into an RFP process, and they're just happy to be in there, and they're not willing to ask the difficult questions that say, if we do these things, are we going to be considered part of this process? Am I going to have access to the decision makers to get these questions done? Because many companies they've already made a decision. Now we want just 2 other vendors to try and push the price around a little bit, but we really aren't going to go with you. So we can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a RFP that we never really had a chance on. And good challengers know how to go out and find out if that's a real opportunity or not. And what I thought about with this baseball analogy is I always have to remember my goal is to get home as I try to get to first, try to get to second, try to get to third, and go through my sales process. But I can't just be a passive watcher as the batter tries to move me around the bases. Does that make sense? If I let myself be passive and wait for the batter or the customer to take the next move, then I may never get to second.
Well, I think it's kind of the difference between behavior and results. I think if we commit to the behavior, the results will take care of themselves. If we commit to getting on base, we end up becoming somewhat passive when we have to, run like hell when there's a hit and we've got a chance to get to the next base, of course. But it's kind of the difference between the process and the result. So,
well, I think, and I believe in process, and I believe in the activities as you've discussed them in the past. Mm-hmm. But if we just talk about activities and we never think about the results that we want, and we hope the activities take care of the results, then we can go off on the wrong activities because we're never focused on the results. I don't think we should only be judged by results, but the results have to happen. And if the results aren't happening, right, we either have a bad process or activity, or we're not focused enough on the second step of the activity. Let's say we're too focused on getting on base and not focused enough on moving around the bases to get to the end result or the run. So those things have to go hand in hand. I don't think we can skip one. And that's what I like what he talks about here is as you're getting on base, as you're getting into any kind of a sales process, remember your goal is to get to whatever that next step is, whether the customer defines it or you do. And if you don't take that, if you don't push for that, you're going to be too passive. You won't be challenging. You'll just be making the customer happy.
And I think there's an insert between activities and results and its objectives. So the success of an activity is measured by the objective reached. So if we focus on the activities, we reach the objectives, and the successful outcome of the objectives, the results will then happen naturally. So it's activities, objectives, and results that we measure as a process. But that's getting a little bit more micro into the overall game.
Well, I think it's the head game, right? I mean, if I'm not thinking of the results, then I don't always have to, in a sales process, I don't always have to do step 2. Sometimes the customer just skips whatever my step 2 is, and we're on step 3. And if I'm back up, I'm no, wait. I got a process here, man. And you skip step 2, and we got to go back and do that. And the customer is ready to buy. I think I can skip that if I'm too process oriented.
Well, if it's met out of order, it's met maybe in step 1. Step 2 is covered within step 1. Then you can go to step 3.
No, maybe the customer didn't need step 2.
Right, or they didn't.
They mentally were already beyond that, right? I mean, somehow it certainly happened to all of us.
It needs to be checked off. Otherwise, I think it's going to come back and haunt you or bite you. And I think that's one of the things that price is. I mean, salespeople don't talk about price, and then when they do a proposal, the prospect flinches and go, "Whoa, wasn't expecting it to be that much."
Right, and because they don't have any negotiating skills, then they start talking about price all the time. But that's a conversation for another day. Exactly. But I know you want to talk about the negotiation part of this before we move beyond this chapter.
Well, not too much. I mean, it's really the constructive tension is challenging them on the way they see the world and pushing back when it comes into tough negotiations. And when the salesperson has the challenger mentality and they're really transition from sort of the account manager or the relationship builder, and they're really getting into challenging the prospect to think differently. And they built that trust and respect in the beginning so that they're engaged in a constructive conversation, the constructive tension with the teaching and the tailoring and taking control. You can really become a very, very strong advocate for a prospect and for later a client that you end up getting a lot of the credit for from them. You become the hero in it. But it really takes a consistent process along the whole system, the selling process that you're following. You can't just all of a sudden become a challenger sale in step 4 when it comes to questioning techniques, because you're changing the game, and it's going to be disruptive to the conversation, and the prospect's not going to know where you're coming from at that point.
Yeah. I think outside the negotiation piece where they talk about preparation and kind of having an understanding of what that process is. They have a good process there on page 135, acknowledge and defer, deepen and broaden, that process that they have. But I don't think they do a good job explaining what taking control is. They spend most of their time talking about what taking control isn't. They basically say, kind of you have it or you don't sort of thing. So I was a little disappointed that they didn't do that. And then their roadmap or their negotiation roadmap, their case study was really about negotiation more than it was about taking control. during that questioning part of the sale. They really touched on that briefly when they asked challenging questions. But I think that's really the guts of it is, again, they're skipping the questioning part. And the challenging questions that you ask are the things that help you take control. Mm-hmm. Like your question, what's next? What's the result if we do these things for you? I think that's a great challenging question.
Yeah, what would happen next?
Right.
And you're also finding out what process they're going through, because it's always about learning about the people that are involved in the process they're going to follow and the criteria that they're going to look for every time they make a decision to move forward. And when you meet that, you fulfilled the objective of that particular activity.
Yeah, good. Well, next week, the next chapter is the manager and the challenger sales model. So if you're a sales manager, next week is going to be very important for you as how do you manage, I don't like the word manage, but how do you lead challenger salespeople and help maybe those people that are non-challengers to become more able to do the challenger model, which I think is a very valid model. Our next book is going to, I want you to get ready for this. Might have to buy it if you like to buy it online. It takes a week to get there. We'll start this in a few weeks. Beyond Selling Value, a Proven Process to Avoid the Vendor Trap by Mark Shanka and Dan Koch. Koch, I would guess that's pronounced. So we only have a few more weeks of the Challenger sale. So go out and get Beyond Selling Value if you want to read along with us.
This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program presented by the host of Get in the Door podcast. Business is heating up, and now is the time to get back on the selling track. While others wait for the market to improve, prospects and opportunities await you now. Perhaps you want to be more productive on your prospecting, or you'd like to increase your closing percentage. Maybe having meetings online is not as comfortable as being in person. Sales reps are telling us they need some honest accountability and skill development to rise above the competition. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why the host of Get in the Door podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. For only $495, you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us your insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. After your 1-hour online session to jumpstart your coaching process, you will receive 5 more half-hour individual coaching sessions to enable you to make improvements over time and create new habits. Most salespeople make their money back with just one sale. Go to getinthedoorpodcast.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself and invest in your future.
Well, our key topic for today is building stronger client relationships. We keyed it up at the beginning. The biggest reason, and this is according to a number of surveys I've seen, but the biggest reason customers leave is they believe they aren't important to that business. They're ignored. They feel like they're just a number. And I'll tell you, when it's times like these, when finding new clients might be difficult, I think it's a great time to put some more effort into pleasing and satisfying and making sure we have great relationships with the current customers that we have. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's in the small details, the smallest details. I left a message for a service technician on my car last week, Thursday, never got a call back. It was just, and this is a luxury model. I mean, I'm not a big
Yugo
guy.
Your Yugo is not a luxury model.
No. It is not the reputation that this dealership should have of not having their sales advisors call somebody back when there's an error message on their car. And it was just like one of those things like, I'm not important. I want to go to a different dealership. But it's very tough to do with this model. And I'm at their mercy, and we'll see what happens today when I take it in.
Yeah, I think there's many little things that we can do, and being responsive obviously is one of the key ones to that. I'm going to go through some ones and obviously have you talk about your thoughts on these too, and I do have an article that supports this that we'll talk about later that we'll link to. But number one, I want to try to make friends with my clients. I want there to be a deeper relationship. This means I send them cards, notes, give them phone calls, call back, when they call. but make them feel special and important. Lunches with them, which are at least half of just friendly conversation and finding out about them, knowing who their families are, so that we can talk about their families and remembering that, making notes on that. I like to have my clients be my friends. I don't know about you.
I agree. I think there needs to be that personal, transparent, authentic relationship. And I really believe it. And this is a Covey line. A man cannot do good in one area and bad in another. So how you are when it comes to a personal relationship is how you are, hopefully naturally, when it comes to a business relationship. And if we've ever studied the DISC profiles, we do a natural and we do an adaptive style. And when there's a big difference between a natural and adaptive style, that's when we have the most stress in our life, because we're really trying to do something that we're not naturally able to do. It's not a natural strength, or it's not a natural behavior.
Yeah, James Allen in As a Man Thinketh says you cannot be one thing inside and another thing outside.
Yeah.
Or another one thing within and another thing without. So who you are at your core, it's very hard to hide that when you try to build a friendship, because who you are is going to come out. And I think that can come out with the way you treat a server, the way you treat the receptionist. Everybody. All those things can come out because you fake like, people are meaningful to you and they're not, then it's going to come out.
And I think I'm guessing this is also one of your goals, is you want to be liked, but you also want to earn their respect. You want to be somebody that they can rely on. If there was a change that needed to be made, you are the person that's going to guide them through that change. And they're going to feel comfortable going through that change, knowing that they're not in control, or there's some areas that they have to give up control, and the outcome may be uncertain. There may be some risk involved. And the greater the risk and the outcome, the greater trust and respect on the salesperson or the guide through that process of change. And knowing that whatever objections come up or whatever challenges come up, you as a salesperson are able to guide them through it and give them the result that they want one way or another.
Well, maybe the difference is that I tend to build a friendship after I've started doing business with them. So I don't start out trying to make a buddy with somebody. It happens as a result of respect, in that we've done a good project together and now we can start to build a friendship afterwards. I'm not one to say, hey, let's go out to 17 ball games before we do business.
Right. Yeah.
Usually we have an opportunity. We deliver on that opportunity. They're satisfied with what we've delivered. And now we're starting to build a relationship that's deeper because we've provided, not hoping to provide or in lieu of providing. I think some salespeople say, if I can make a deep enough friendship, it doesn't matter how crappy my results are. And I would never be in that camp.
No, of course not.
This. So I think it's a deepening of a relationship built on respect and built on a productive outcome.
You mentioned earlier about sending cards and kind of standing out during special events. One thing that I've done, and other listeners are welcome to adopt it, is in most states, you're able to find out when that business incorporated and the start date for that business. And if you recognize them on their anniversary date, you're really going to stand out, because there's not a lot of people that really go that far. But they might recognize anniversaries, or they might comment on LinkedIn anniversaries or birthdays or other areas where they end up getting a lot of attention during a specific time. It's like, I think one of the worst days of the year is Mother's Day, because we should be celebrating Mother's Day every day of the year, not just on Mother's Day. And when we just concentrate too much on one day, we take the emphasis off on the behavior that we should do every day.
Yeah, and I think, cards and notes seem to be hard for me. I'm going to give a plug to a friend of mine. She has a process for sending out cards. And if this is okay with you, Scott.
Yeah, she's a friend of mine too.
Yeah, Wendy Blomseth. Wendy Blomseth, BLOMSETH.com. We'll put it in the show notes, but a much more inexpensive way than trying to do it yourself. And she takes care of all of it and even can do photos and everything. So have an assistant that does that, or somebody, but it's not the most valuable piece of work you can do. But if you can find a process to do that, it's better.
And if you're having a bad day, Wendy's a great person to call, because you will not have a bad day after talking to Wendy.
No, she's great. She's a real professional and a real networker. So
great spirit.
Yep. Okay, my second piece is to respect their time. And you and I have talked about this a lot. Don't drop in without bringing value. it's not all about the small talk. I do believe there's a little bit of time for small talk, but somebody that gets too much small talk, I'm ready to walk them out of my office. Right. And that brings me to the third point: get out before they make you leave. Don't overstay your welcome.
Mm-hmm. Always have a goal when you interrupt somebody. When you're calling them, you're interrupting them. What is your goal? What is your objective? What do you want to accomplish? How do you want to exchange value so that they end up picking the phone up next time you call? Because if you don't give them value when you call them, they won't pick up the phone next time. I mean, I have a very good friend. Every time they call, I will not pick up the phone because that's 45 minutes I will never get back.
I know. As much as you like them, it's like, this isn't going to go anywhere. Or it's going to be all about them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
How you doing? Well, let me tell you about me.
Yeah.
So I have when I went on one of my first appointments when I was with my first company selling training services, the sales manager went with me, and it was to a current customer. And we got there, and the first thing the sales manager, my boss, said was, "Well, Mr. Johnson, well, Abe," he said, "we know you've done business with us in the past. What have we done?" And Abe looked at him. He said, first of all, it's Mr. Johnson, and second of all, if you don't know what business you did with me in the past, what are you doing here?
Right. Yeah.
And man, did I learn a lesson from that about respecting people's time, doing a little bit of pre-approach, really knowing what's going on. It took me 6 months to rebuild that relationship until finally he goes, "Hey, you can call me Abe now." I mean, so it was, we didn't respect his time, and he caught us on it, and man, did we get nailed.
No, yeah.
The number 3 is reward them for their loyalty. So what can you do to help your customer and say, we really care about you? I always make the analogy of the health club. I belong to a health club for almost 15 years now, and the only note I get from them is once a year they send me a card saying, "We're raising your rates."
Oh, yeah.
And that's how much they appreciate me. And if it wasn't for the person at the door who knows my name and talks to me, and the fact that they're the only one in town, I'd be gone. So what can we do to reward our customers other than raise their rates? Are they first to hear about changes or new product? Can you make a big deal of their occasions? Like you said, their anniversary date. Maybe you can do a big deal for them on their anniversary and do something special for them, and especially for the lower level staff. I always see Christmas gifts given to the boss and very little to the staff, people who you work with every day. So find ways to reward them for their loyalty. Can you, if you send them stuff, can you stick in a hat or a piece of tchotchke or something for the guys that open the boxes? And then number 4, develop partnerships. Be part of their events. If they have something big going on, see if you can help support them, help them solve their problems. And then can you bring them in on new product development? I think that's a real way to say thank you to a customer. Hey, we're looking how to develop some new products. You've been a good customer. Do you want to take them first and try them out, see how they work, give us your opinion? Those sorts of things can be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing to keep in mind is we need to know why somebody bought from us. What was the value that they found in working with us? And we need to be able to continue to deliver that. If we ever change the offering, we're going to risk losing the customer. And you've seen this with some companies. I remember when Nextel was around, they had free incoming calls. So boy, I mean, people would get Nextel and they'd end up having, they'd advertise their cell phone number and people would call them on their cell phone, free incoming calls. They changed that offering, boom. And they lost a lot of customers at that time.
Yeah, I just got a letter from my bank that said, "We're going to do this service for you, and you're going to be charged. You'll see the charge for it on your next bill."
Right. Yeah.
And I had to call them and go, I don't want that service. And they said, "Well, it's not really, that you're already getting that, blah, blah, blah." It's like, wow, what a badly worded thing to almost, my wife who does my bookkeeping, she said, "Let's get a different bank."
Right. Absolutely.
And so they make some mistakes in even sounding like they're changing the offering.
Right. Yeah. Netflix did it when they separated the DVDs and the online. They lost a tremendous amount of subscribers when they did that. However, their revenues increased significantly. So it was amazing how they restructured their business model, but revenues increased.
Because they found a better way to advertise that so they didn't lose them and got both a win-win rather than, well, we're going to lose so many, but we think we're going to pay it off on the other side.
Right. So really knowing why they bought, and I think a lot of salespeople don't know why a customer bought from them. And it's really important to find out what's most valuable from the product or service you're selling to your customers. after they become customers.
Right.
Call your clients and say, I'm kind of curious, what do you like most about working with us? 30 days afterwards, how's it going so far? What do you like most about working with us? Right after they buy, what made you to decide to commit to buying from us today? What was it that made the final decision?
Right.
And make sure that you keep track of that and continue to deliver on that, because that's what they find most valuable.
Yeah, and I think these companies make a big mistake when they separate, in some ways, the salesperson from the long-term customer relationship. I've even seen companies that say, well, you're only going to get paid for this company for 2 years for all the work you did, and then only new business is going to get counted. And you really take away the incentive for the salesperson to build this kind of a relationship with them.
And that depends on the job description of the salesperson and the sales culture of the company.
I've seen it to be quite a mistake quite often. I just think that if I built this business, then I have something to gain by continuing to build it and continuing to grow it. And if you're going to take away the value of that and only make me a hunter, I've seen this with insurance sales a lot. They get these kids in, they make them hunters, they sell it to their family, and then they got nothing else, and then they quit. And the boss keeps the business. So there's a lot of bad models out there that say you're only going to get paid for a short period of time for the work you did.
And I think when it comes to acquiring new customers, we need to think about their top fears when they work with salespeople. And some of the fears are losing control, salespeople helping prospects when the prospects don't feel like they need any help. So you're almost enabling a prospect, or you're talking down to them, thinking that they can't do something themselves. That causes prospects to become very defensive. And there are a lot of very smart prospects that make dumb decisions. I think every salesperson can agree with that. You're a very smart prospect. You're making a really stupid decision when you end up making that decision like that. And then sometimes salespeople focus too much on solutions and not the problems. Your solutions have to stick to a problem in order for them to have a value. You start going in talking about all the solutions and the prospects don't recognize you have a problem, you're wasting their time. And they will not pick up the phone next time when you call.
Yeah, I don't think that we can. You've talked about assumptions. I think we make too many assumptions that people are in trouble and they need our help, and we really need to have a conversation with them. Long term, we want to build a long-term relationship with these customers. The real value is in that long-term relationship, not in the quick hit. And so that's what relationship building is all about. How can we work together in a partnership long-term to help each other? So some of the resources, Scott, I know you have a blog. So
I have a blog, yeah. What makes you think I need your help? Is one.
All right. And I have
an article. Huh?
An article. I think they're the same things, but
yeah, they are.
Strengthening client relationships, and that'll go over a lot of the things we talked about. This segment of the Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by Steve Kloida's book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer, and the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
Today's golden nugget and closes from a quote from G.K. Chesterton. A good novel tells us the truth about its hero. A bad novel tells us the truth about its author. And the reason I like this topic is because of what we're presenting, the difference between a solution, a hero, and a salesperson, the author. We really need to concentrate on who's the hero.
Yeah, I think the solution is the hero as well, but I've attended a lot of sessions on story selling, and they want to make the customer the hero. So do you think that's a conflict?
I think the customer being a hero is the customer's decision to buy from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in our world, when we teach a salesperson a technique, a skill, a practice, they go out and use it, they're the hero because they had the guts and courage to do it. And the hero is always the one that has the knowledge and the commitment to the action in order to get the desired outcome. And there's so often salespeople know what to do, but they don't do it.
Well, that might be a good topic for us in the future on this story selling. We haven't talked about that very much. I think I do it innately. You probably do too, but a lot of people really get into fact benefit, and they don't build a scenario for the customer.
I like metaphors. Metaphors are really short stories, and you use a comparison, and then it gets it into the perspective of the prospect, and then they can see the connection of the value.
Well, if that's interesting to you out there, let us know. Contact us at getinthedoorpodcast.com. All the information that we have today will be in the show notes at getinthedoorpodcast.com.
Our next episode, we're going to have a guest. Ron Lehman is going to talk about complacency. I've seen Ron Lehman present many, many times. He is so knowledgeable when it comes to the life of a salesperson, and I'll share more about his background when you tune in next week. He's funny, he's entertaining, he's philosophical, he's deep.
I'll be the judge of that.
Well, okay.
And so will our listeners. So hopefully he'll be all those things that you talked about. But I have seen him speak, and he's very good.
Yeah. So you want to tune in. Then we're going to cover Chapter 8 of the Challenger Sale, the managers of the Challenger selling model.
All right. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.